Hi everyone, I'm Christiana Grimmelt with the Literary Translators Association of Canada. Thank you very much for joining us today. You're going to hear from some fantastic translators from the University of Alberta. They either hold or are working on PhDs or master's degrees, mostly with the Department of Modern Languages and Cultural Studies. And your host will be Dr. Anne Malena. She's a longtime instructor there and also the editor of the journal TransCulturAl, a journal of cultural and translation studies. Dr. Malena also hosts an event. She's been doing it for 18 years. It's a conference on translation on St. Jerome's Day or World Translation Day on September 30th. And obviously due to COVID-19, they weren't able to do that in person. So she was gracious enough to partner with us to organize a virtual event. What you'll see today is the second half of that because it was a bit long. So the first half is available on our Facebook page and is a really compelling work that I encourage you to check out. It features Dr. Lele Chen and Dr. Ruth Dyke-Federau, both from the University of Alberta, and talks about a work called The Sweet Bloods of IU East J, which was commissioned by the Cree Board of Health and Social Services of James Bay and was created by 27 local storytellers in the community and Dr. Dyke-Federau, and looks at people's lives and experiences there. We're really grateful to be able to talk about this work and thank the people of the James Bay Cree for this opportunity. So again, check it out on our Facebook page. It's a really fascinating discussion and features Dr. Chen's Mandarin translation and her conversation around why that was really important as well. So I'll leave you with Dr. Anne Malena, your host, and you'll be hearing from some fantastic emerging and established translators today. Thank you, and thank you for supporting translation in Canada.
Thank you, Christiana. I won't say much about the journal. The theme was from last year, but it didn't work out because I didn't get enough submissions to have a thematic issue. So it's going to end up being a non-thematic issue. However, I got quite a few creative pieces. So as I explained earlier, so it's going to be a highly creative issue. So I recommend it. There's going to be actually 3 articles and 1 essay. And the rest, we have translations. Lily has her translation of Ruth's story and another translation. So yeah, by all means, I encourage you to have a look at it. So our first reader is Sofía. And so I asked them to send me a bio today. So they all responded quite quickly. So it was great. I can do that sometimes, get away with it. So, and most of them had them all ready to go. So they're very busy people. So Sophia Monson is a PhD candidate in comparative and transnational literatures in MLCS. We have these 4 different streams. So that's what that one of them is that. Born in Spain, she completed her previous studies at Universidad de Alcalá in Madrid. Always passionate about languages, cultures, and new adventures, she moved to the United States in order to further her postgraduate adventure in 2016. Her academic research focuses on ideology and censorship in translation and the circulation of translated literature between 20th century Spain and Argentina. As a poet, translator, and editor in both English and Spanish, Sofía internally finds herself navigating between these 2 languages, not only in her daily life, but also in every form of literature she touches. Her first collection of poems was published last year under the title Alas. Is that right? Oh, Alas. Alas in Spanish. Congratulations. At the moment, she's working on her second poetry collection, while self-translating a selection of some poems into English. So that's why I asked her to participate tonight, because last year, and this is the piece that I'm talking about, that piece is in the upcoming issue of TransCulturAl. I asked her to read something else tonight, so not to give it all away. And lo and behold, she has another self-translation of another poem. I'll let you introduce your piece, because although you all sent it to me, I know exactly what you're going to be reading. I forgot to write them down. So I will ask you to introduce your own piece tonight. Thank you so much.
Well, first of all, Anne, thanks for your nice introduction that I didn't read at all. Just kidding. And well, thanks everyone for being part of this. Thanks Lily and Ruth for sharing your beautiful and really touching project with us in original and translation. This year, I believe that Saint Jerome's, this celebration of translation is probably more needed than ever. I think it's a beautiful event, and this is going to be my third year as part of Modern Languages and Culture Studies, as part of the department. And this year is different, but I'm so happy that after all, and didn't want to cancel or postpone at least the creative part of it, the creative and beautiful side of it. About the poem that I've chosen for tonight. The original, the Spanish, it's titled Proceso de Balcón en Cuarentena. And this poem, and like other poems that I tend to write, this one I wrote in Spanish in full, so from the beginning, and I completed it in Spanish without touching any other language, which is normally weird because I'm very multilingual when it comes to my poetry. So the process of this poem was rather simple. It came out from just enjoying my quarantine routine in my balcony for the first time. I want to say that it was back in May when I wrote this, and I remember it because the snow was finally gone. So that was a good thing. You could be outside and not be just dying of cold after a long winter. So anyway, weeks later, a publishing opportunity came up, and they asked for a bilingual creative work. So, well, given the theme of this poem that I'm gonna read for you, I decided to give an English sibling to it. And anyway, so I'm gonna go first with the translation, with the English version of it. And before I start reading it for you, I need to tell you, I need to acknowledge, I need to give some credit to our dear friend and colleague, Jonathan Garfinkel, who is also part of the department, because he's been proofreading it and just making it more, palatable for the English readership. So I hope you like it, and thanks, Jonathan, for your help here. So quarantine balcony in the midst. Never will I ever be a blank page again. Rewritten in the midst of memory, inherited reminiscence cannot blur themselves. The soil, still covered in snow, carries a warm, arid scent, and the lines, almost perpendicular, eternal dusty plains. In thirst and oblivion will sprouts bloom, scarce sap amidst scarce blades. The canvas transforms, alters the brush, alters the hand. The tones no longer honey-colored, but in the process, in becoming, in the volatility of fragmentation, enchained in cities, languages, continents, a love giver. Everything redrawn in this multiplicity, and the background never white ever again, forever to be the flow of the first page. And now we'll proceed with the original, which in this case, it is truly the original, because it was not a transcreation this time, it was a poem in Spanish. Proceso de balcón en cuarentena. Nunca seré ya página en blanco. Los nuevos horizontes se reescriben en medio de mi memoria, pero los recuerdos de mi natal legado no consiguen desdibujarse. El terreno, si bien estos inviernos permanece nevado, siempre llevará ese olor cálido árido, y las líneas aperpendiculadas son eternas llanuras en polvo. En sed y olvido brotarán los pulgares, savia escasa entre escasas aspas. El lienzo permuta, cambia de pincel, de mano. Los tonos dejan de ser miel, pero son en proceso, siempre en el llegar a ser, en la volatilidad de la fragmentación, en el cambio de ciudad, de lengua, de continente, del dador de amor. Todo se redibuja en multiplicidad y el fondo, nunca ya blanco, no dejará de ser el flujo de la página inicial. Thank you. That was it.
Thank you, Sophia. Wonderful.
Thanks so much.
Thank you so much. Next, we're just going to go through, right? We're just going to go through, and if there are questions, we wait till the end. Is that the plan? Okay. She's nodding her head, so okay. Our next reader is Matthew Danzinger, who is a second-year master student in East Asian Studies, focusing on the translation of modern Japanese free verse poetry. Quite the task. So this time we're going to hear, again, the English first, right?
Yeah, the English first. So yeah, once again, thank you for everyone who read before, to Ruth and Lily for sharing that, and also for Sophia for the beautiful poem. Yeah, so I'm reading from what is most likely the first ever book of free verse poetry published in Japan. It's called Robo no Hana, which I translate as Roadside Flowers, by Kawaji Ryuko. So Kawaji Ryuko is described, it's really interesting. He's described in a lot of English scholarship as having written the first, or at least published the first free verse poem in Japanese. However, most scholarship kind of leaves him there and then goes on to way more popular poets. And when I found out that almost none of his poetry has been translated except for that one first one, I thought that it would be like an interesting project. And so that's what I'm working on for my master's. And this poem is from that first book of poetry. It's the very first poem, which in English is called Sai, and in Japanese is called Toiki. So the English first, Sai. Garden of silence, smell of autumn. When was the night hiding? When was the moon shining? The light that spills through the dark trees also pales. The tragic shadow trembles in the grass. The tears that crossed my fingers and the shudder of regret. Melancholy clouds the surface of the pond in silver. The fallen gold leaves of the fragile aspen begin to scatter, wind. The dappled light on the darkness of the foliage, on top of the fallen leaves, again within my empty arms, tears sorrowfully on your face. When was the night grieving? When was the night becoming pale? And that's from August 1910. So the original, Toiki. Chinmoku no niwa, aki no nioi. Itsu kashira yoru ga shizundeiru. Itsu kashira 月が差している。この間をこぼれる光を青ざめ、痛ましい影は草むらに震えて、指を組み結んだ涙と空意のおののき。池の表には、夕朱が金色に曇り、か細い白葉の金の落ち葉が飛んで散ってゆく風。乱れる光のこの葉の暗闇に、落ち葉の上に、また我が移ろうな海なのうちに、涙さめざめのとした君の表を、いつかしら夜が嘆き、いつかしら夜が青ざめている。That's the end.
Thank you. Yeah, that's the way to clap on Zoom is to wave your hands like that, which is also the sign language for it. So we might as well just all adopt it. And I can do that. I can't clap. I should have mentioned that Matthew, I course supervise Matthew with my colleague Anne Commons in East Asian Studies, not because I know anything about Japanese, but because I know a little bit about translation. And I'm really proud of him. So our next reader is Marina Allemano, a former colleague of mine, who holds a PhD in comparative literature and has taught Scandinavian studies at the University of Alberta in our department. She has published 3 monographs on Danish writers, written and published in Danish. And she has translated 3 books, novels that is, by 3 Danish women writers. And she mentioned that she's also a very avid knitter. Thank you, Marina, for sending me something shorter without all the titles, because my Danish is non-existent.
I'll be happy to help you anytime.
Okay.
Well, I'm an old timer, and it's wonderful to be in the company of so many young people and all these languages. It's quite an evening. Thank you for inviting me. As Anne mentioned, I translate from Danish to English, and I have concentrated on women's literature because of that generation where it seems to be very important to deal with women's literature and translate it. My current writer is called Dorrit Willumsen, and this is the latest book that I translated. It deals with another Danish writer, a gay writer from the beginning of the 1900s, of the kind of temperament of Oscar Wilde, so it's very entertaining. And also very cleverly written as a fictional biography. However, I will just read a little poem, well, it's a long poem by her that was penned in 1983. And I'll have to say Dorrit Willumsen is one of the, she's a wonderful writer, has published, probably 50 books in her lifetime, started when she was 25. She was born in 1940, so she's a child of the Second World War and has never had a year, I think, without having published something. This poem is a prose poem. In Danish, we call it knækprosa, which means it's broken prose. And it's probably a childhood memory from around 1950, I'm guessing. So you have to imagine the setting is about 1950 after the war. The ashtray. As a child, I saw an ashtray of porcelain in the middle of the table in the summer house under the sleepy light of the kerosene lamp. Outside, darkness pressed the jasmine against the pane. There were snails, hedgehogs, and frogs, and on very bright days, the flowers had faces. But nothing filled me more with wonder than this ashtray. It was shaped like a bed, a conjugal bed with a green porcelain blanket and small green pillows. On one side of the bed rested a rather plump woman, her hair all gray. Only her heavy feet and her head were showing. Otherwise, the blanket of green porcelain covered her critical womanly parts. Next to her, the bed was closed and smooth, a green envelope, not giving off any cues. But the belly of the woman formed a bulge, a dome, a hill. Against her belly, the men tapped off the ashes from their cigars. The men in my family, good, crusty, steady, peppery men, filled a green porcelain bed with soft gray ashes and an acrid smell of butts from their cigars. And I was thinking and thinking of where the porcelain man might have gone, of whether the woman really was asleep, and of what the men were thinking, and of what my mother, my grandmother, and all my aunts were thinking, while the men filled the air with smoke, heavy and dense, on all those long summer Sundays. It's from a collection of poems called Umage par, which means odd couples. Askebæret. Som barn så jeg et askebær af porcelæn midt på bordet under havehusets søvnige petroleumslampe. Udenfor trykkede mørket jasminer mod ruden, og der var en snegle og pindsvin og frøer, og på særlige lysedage havde blomsterne ansigter. Men intet fyldte mig med større undren end netop det askebær. Det forestillede en seng, en ægte seng med grønt porcelænstæppe og små grønne puder. I sengens ene halvdel hvilede en temmelig tyk og meget gråhåret kvinde. Kun hendes tunge fødder og hovedet stak ud. Ellers dækkede tæppet af grønt porcelæn hendes kritiske punkter som kvinde. Sengen ved siden af hende var lukket og glat, en grøn konvolut uden budskaber. Men kvindens mave dannede en bule, en hvælving, en høj. Og mod maven slog mændene cigarasken af. Mændene i min familie, gode, knarvorne, besindige, hidsige mænd, fyldte en grøn porcelænsseng med blød grå aske og bittert lugtende skod. Og jeg tænkte og tænkte på, hvor porcelænsmanden var gået hen, om kvinden virkelig sov, og hvad mændene tænkte, og hvad min mor, min mormor og alle mine tanter tænkte, mens mændene røg luften tæt og tung alle vore lange søndage. The end.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Ooh, I love the sound of these languages. I'm working on Turkish right now, just because of Netflix. And actually, we have a Turkish student, so she's helping me. Okay, Gary is next. And you can see his name, which is a good thing because he doesn't allow me to say it out loud because I can't say it right. So he uses Gary as his, what do you call it? The McDonald's name or something?
No, Starbucks name.
A Starbucks name, sorry. I had the wrong company. Yeah, so I will not do that. I always write it when I send him an email, but I won't say it. I tried at the beginning, but he just really was not pleased. So Gary, I co-supervised Gary with a colleague, Lynn Penrod, also in translation in our department, and it's a pleasure. He's a PhD student in transnational and comparative literatures. So, oh, you've got it backwards from Sofía. So I don't know what this program is anymore.
Mine is
Because
the correct one, transnational and comparative literatures.
Of course it is. Okay. What else have you done? At the University of Alberta, he translates from, oh, you've got me on this one, Shanghainese.
Shanghainese, yes.
See? Shanghainese.
Told you to practice it. You didn't.
Mandarin and Cantonese. And he's very modest because he's got a few publications to his credit, but so be it. I will leave it there. So please introduce your piece, Karen.
Well, first of all, thank you. Thank you to Christiana and thank you to Dr. Malena for organizing this. I actually dropped out of last year's reading, and this year I'm not gonna weasel out of it because otherwise Dr. Malena is gonna kill me. I am reading something unconventional today. I'm not reading a poem. I'm not reading an excerpt from a short story. I'm reading a Facebook post by my dear friend Houssem, who is a poet and a journal editor based in Hong Kong. So for the past 2 months, he has been documenting life in Hong Kong during the pandemic and under China's new national security law. So this is one of his Facebook posts. Wednesday, August 26, 2020. 24 new COVID-19 cases were detected in Hong Kong today. The ceiling-mounted aircon in the lobby of my apartment building was on again, off again, just like the mixed weather in recent days. This morning, a handyman was called to make a thorough check on the machine. Spare parts were scattered on the floor, which was covered by cardboard and nylon sacks. The handyman stood on a little wooden ladder right below the air conditioner, head raised, cleaning the ceiling unit with great care. Owners and tenants passed him by, yet he concentrated on his work as if no one was around. What a privilege to not get distracted in these challenging times. The government had been swearing that black is white, and everyone was bombarded by news, real or fake, on social media every single day. Sitting upright on her stool, the building superintendent watched the handyman work with a stern look, like an overseer. The aircon's not been working properly for quite a while, she complained to me. And this weather, hot and humid, I sweat so much that even my uniform gets soaking wet by the end of the day, for crying out loud. Quieter than Hennessy Road and less vibrant than Johnston Road, Queens Road East in Wan Chai is a 2-lane street with many stoplights and traffic jams. Alongside narrow sidewalks, there's a considerable number. I'm having trouble hearing you. I just activated my Siri, I don't know why. There's a considerable number of iron fences and scaffolds. Storefronts on this street have a dismal look. Frame shops, furniture shops, grocery stores, cafes, bakeries, currency exchange shops, jewelry stores. One by one, they went out of business during the pandemic. Recently, renovation has started on one of the storefronts, turning the premises into a new coffee shop. Next to it stands a little forlorn-looking store selling fish and chips, as well as beer. On its exterior walls, there used to be graffiti, among which a slogan in English was the most eye-catching: "Fuck the rich and the powerful." The drawings and words, however, have been covered by new paint. In the evening, I got back home from work. The aircon in the lobby was still malfunctioning. It seems that even with full concentration, you won't be able to get the job done every time. It is too often that we are at a loss for what to do. And then here comes the Chinese version. 2020年8月26日星期三，今天香港24宗新冠肺炎确诊病例。住宅楼下大堂的冷气时好时坏，就像最近时晴时雨的天气。今天中午有师傅来做全面检查， 地上散落着冷气机的零件。冷气机正下方的地面上铺着纸皮和红白蓝，还搭着一把小木梯。师傅就站在小木梯上面，仰着头细心清理冷气机。多少业主和住客从身边走过，他都心无旁骛，专心致志的工作。这座城市正在发生指鹿为马的事，报纸新闻、社交媒体铺天盖地，可以专心做事，殊为难得。腰板挺得老直的看工女士像监工一样，眼神严峻地看着师傅工作。她埋怨这段时间冷气机坏了，天时又湿又热，经常流汗，制服都湿透了。老命买真係。湾仔皇后大道东比轩尼诗道多了一份宁静，比庄士敦道又少了一份生活气息。皇后大道东只能双线行车，交通灯又多，常常塞车，人行道较窄，街边有铁围栏，工程搭棚相对较多。虽然皇后大道东亦可谓店铺林立，但是他们都给人一种颓唐的感觉。疫情时期，这条街上的铺头此起彼伏的结业，画框铺、家具铺、杂货铺、咖啡店、面包铺、兑换铺、首饰铺，几乎数不过来。最近这条街有个铺位开始装修，看起来像是咖啡店。它旁边卖英式炸鱼薯条和啤酒的颓唐小店。它的外墙原本是一句英文涂鸦 "Fuck the rich and the powerful"， 但是现在被新的油漆盖过了。下午回家，住宅楼下大堂还是坏的，专心致志也不一定能把眼前的事情做好。世界有太多事情超出我们的把握。Thank you， 谢谢，唔該。
Thank you, Gary. Hey, we got to hear the slogan twice. That's good. There seems to be an emergency at Christiana's, outside of Christiana's house. Either that or Christmas is coming.
No, I'll shut my lamp off. It's some sort of strange light thing that's going on because it's just the lamp. So beware of lamps. Sorry about that.
Okay. Well, it's funny. Okay, last but never least, Houssem. Houssem bin Lazreg is a blogger, a freelance translator, interpreter, and a PhD candidate, a teaching assistant for French Arabic at the department at MLCS, and a French language instructor, I'm getting tired, I think, with the Canadian School of Public Service. Those are the judges? Are those the judges? The public service?
No. It's the language school. I think the one that teaches the federal employees.
Oh, federal employees. Woo. His research interests include politics, translation, and journalism. His translations have appeared in journals such as TransCulturAl, Transference, Multilingual Discourses, and Metamorphosis, while his commentaries on international politics are published with Reset Dialogues on Civilizations, International Relations, I had practiced that, Al Jazeera, ABC, and The Conversation. Okay, Houssem, welcome, and please introduce your piece.
Thank you, Anne, and thank you for organizing as every year the San Jerome, and happy Translation Day or happy early Translation Day for everyone. So for this year's translation reading, so I decided to choose something from, it's actually part of Al Jazeera. So Al Jazeera, it's called AG+. Many of you maybe have come across that AG+ thing somehow on Facebook or Twitter. So it's one of the branches of Al Jazeera that produces like digital content. And there is like this poet, Tamim Al-Barghouthi, who has now his poetry showcased in these videos, in these short videos on AG+. And like it's poems, but they are like performance. So they have like all these visuals, like all this graphic design. So the poem is changed into a story with all these beautiful visuals in it. And so I came across this poem that caught my attention, and I translated it to English. And this poem is called A Young Woman. So I'll start with the English translation, and then I'll share the Arabic original text. So this poem belongs to what we call al-ghazal in Arabic, or like in English, it's the genre where you have that romantic guy expressing his longing and love for his beloved. And it uses a lot of images, poetic images, especially from the Arab culture. And I will highlight some of those after when I read. So I'll start. So, a young woman. Say to the young woman who resurrects me and then kills me, what is left of me is not enough to survive. O doe from classical poetry. And the doe here is admired in the Arabic culture. The gazelle, it's like the gazelle, the doe, is admired for its intelligence, beauty, and elegant movement. This is in classical Arabic poetry. O doe from classical poetry, you make the noble shed streams of tears, both secretly and in public. You make rivers flow as you bring nobles to tears, both in public and in secret. I thought I saw her, yet in reality I did not. But the elation of poetry overwhelms me. Every time she crosses your mind, you're reminded of the story of Layla and Majnun. So here, Layla and Majnun is a poem composed by the Persian poet Nizami, and it's based on a 7th century a Bedouin, another poet called Qais ibn Mualla. So it's the same, basically the same poem. So you're reminded of the story of Layla and Majnun. Along her waist curve, she deviates clergymen, swaying them between a religion and another. If a saint saw her face, he would tell us it would be fine to sin every now and then, as her beauty leads them to covet the virgins of heaven. An entire nation would be driven to hell. Once beauty is understood, it loses its power, and in her absence, beauty no longer exists. I recognize beauty, but I cannot define it. It appears to my eyes, but not to my mind. My soul is the remnant of a sky that inhabits my body. And my soul invites me up to the heavens. If I fail to take off, she would complain of my indolence and protests me to the servants of God. And if my soul sensed another like her, my heart would beat like prisoners beating on the cell doors. She's like the prisoner who, from a distance, saw his family and shouted, "Do not leave me here." And the soul seeks the company of another soul in the face of alienation between water and clay. So the Arabic version. صبية قل الصبية تحييني وترديني لم يبق مني سوى ما ليس يبقيني يا ظبية في قديم الشعر ما برحت تبكي الكريم بمنهل ومكنون رأيتها وأنا في الحق لم أرها لكنه طرب للشعر يعروني تحيل كل فتى مرت بخاطره وكل بنت إلى ليلى ومجنون تميل من قدها ما قد تميل به أئمة الناس من دين إلى دين ولو رأى وجهها القديس قال لنا لا بأس بالذنب بين الحين والحين ويدخل النار فيها أمة طمع من حسنها في جنان الحور والعين قد ينقص الحسن قدرا من تيقنه ولا كحسن بظهر الغيب مظنون وأعرف الحسن لكن لا أعرفه يبدو لعيني ولا يبدو لتعييني روحي بقايا سماء أسكنت جسدا ولم تزل للسماء الروح تدعوني إن لم أطر حسبتني لم أطر كسلا واستنجدت بعباد الله تشكوني فإن أحست بأخرى مثلها خفقت طرق المساجين أبواب الزنازين هي الأسير رأى في البعد أسرته فصاح لا ترجع للدار من دوني والروح تسعى وراء الروح تؤنسها من غربة الدار بين الماء والطين. Thank you. That was it.
And there you have it. Comments, questions?
It looks like we have a question here from for, I will say your name is Gary. Feel free to.
Yeah.
See,
handy.
Here, Marina, do you want to ask your question? You're unmuted.
Well, I don't dare to pronounce your name now, but
no, don't.
Is there no equivalent of the "fuck the rich" slogan in the language you translated into?
Oh, hang on a sec.
Have I unmuted myself yet? Okay, I have.
Yes.
Is there equivalent? Sorry. Are you asking, is there equivalent of the phrase "fuck the rich and the powerful" in Mandarin?
Yes, because you repeated the English phrase.
Yes, I did. But
yeah.
The thing is, you know, in the Chinese version, that phrase is in English. He just, you know, writes English in there. So.
Okay.
And I mean, this is quite common in, you know, writings from Hong Kong, because Hong Kong used to be a British colony. So, you know, many writers and poets, they're bilinguals, they're trilinguals. So they're always like a mixture of, you know, languages in their writings. And it's quite interesting, you know, when you think about translating, because how do you, if you're translating their writings into English, then how do you, you know, preserve that multiplicity of languages that has already embedded in their writings, right?
Yes.
But that's a great question.
Well, it's the same thing in Danish, because the F word is a favorite of all Danes now, and I keep on telling people it's not that casual here, but they have adopted it completely. Thank you.
No problem.
If I trust Netflix, because I watch a lot of foreign shows, it's happening all over the world.
Right.
So if anyone else has questions, feel free to add them in. I had a question for Sophia, and this could be for Gary as well. I was really curious about how Sophia, your poem, because it was your own poem, was about your time in quarantine. And I was wondering for both of you what it was like to write or translate something that was so close to home and, you know, dealt with the pandemic and the anxiety and that sort of thing that all of us are facing right now. I'll just unmute you first, Sophia.
Okay, I think I am, yeah. Well, that's a very complex question. And it's like all sorts of affect in there, so I don't even know where to start. As for the techniques, the approach, the translation approach that I take when self-translating, it depends. I think it depends on like the purpose. What I think the purpose of the poem is going to be. Because sometimes I've written things that I needed a translation for because it was a text for someone. You know, there was like an end goal in there. Like I wanted someone specifically, or like an audience, like a collective audience, to enjoy that piece, and I needed to just translate it. When that's the case, I think I let myself be a little bit more free, as in like, I guess, perform a transcreation where not just words are translated, but I really pay attention to sound, which is really hard to do because I'm working with Spanish, which is a Romance language, and it's just full of sounds and rhythm and passion. And I think that's my poetry. So sometimes if I try to, you know, convey that into English, people are like, well, this is awkward. Like this line here, that's like a translation. Like, you know, people still have this expectation that translation needs to be polished, like, and it needs to be read as like something that it's not a translation but an original. And with poetry, that's like, it can happen. And I don't know, maybe you all can tell me if that's what you felt with the translation, with the English version of the poem. Because I'm aware, like, even Jonathan, who was the editor, proofreader of the poem, he was like, what do you make me this line? Like, what do you want to say here with this like words? I'm like, maybe it's not the best combination of words, but the sound though, or, you know, the rhythm, it's hard, it's complex, but I love it because it allows me that creativity. It's like, I find that in poetry, at least, you can, and I dare to do that because it's my poems. Like, when I'm translating, I love translating poetry is my favorite thing, and I do all the translations into English from like other authors, other poets, and I feel like I'm way more rigorous when I'm doing that. When I'm just working with my own works, that's hard. And sometimes I even like go back to the original and change things in Spanish because, you know, I found a better way of saying things, or like a metaphor that just works better in English, and all of a sudden that makes me think of something even better in Spanish as well, and I improve. I ended up just working in this cycle where I'm like improving, and it's like a process, I guess, more than just a translation as a direct act. It's a process more than that.
Thank you very much. I think there are a couple more questions in the chat, so maybe I'll jump to those ones. Actually, Ruth, do you want to ask your questions? Hang on a sec.
Hi, I have questions both for Matthew and Houssem. Matthew, how long have you spoken Japanese? Have you learned it as an adult, or did you know it as a kid? And Houssem, I would like to know, are you also a poet, or do you prefer only to translate it? So whoever.
I guess I'll start then. Yeah, so I did learn it as an adult. I started actually at the U of A in 2013. I just went back on Bear Tracks to double check. It's when I took my first class. However, the reason I took Japanese was because all growing up through elementary, junior high, high school, one of my best friends is half Japanese. And so like I would always hear him speaking it with his parents, and doing German bilingual school in elementary, and then in high school to get my language other than English to graduate, I took German again. I kind of wanted to try something very different. So I started taking that, and my original degree was in music. I was just taking Japanese to fill the requirements, but I ended up liking it so much, and then the music degree didn't work out. So then I decided to make it my major and learn about the wonderful world that is translating.
Thank you. And Ruth, I think you had a question. Oh, I'll unmute you again. Got another question for Houssem as well?
I already asked it, so.
Okay. Oh, sorry. So I guess I have to unmute. Oh, you're on. Okay. Got it.
Thank you, Ruth. No, actually, I don't write poetry. I feel lazy. I don't really write poetry. I write more about politics than poetry. So all the creative writing, it will be invested in like what is happening around the world, like commenting on l'actualité, the news basically, and especially with things that affect the region like North Africa and the Middle East. I'm more engaged there, like through the writing. These poetries, I translate poetry sometimes because I come across pieces that are really gems, and sometimes I feel like it's a loss that the Anglophone audience is not seeing these gems like produced somewhere in the Arab world. And it is sometimes it's a really tedious task, especially like for this piece. It's the poet uses like the classical Arabic style, which is a very hard style to reproduce in English, whether the rhyme, whether the images themselves. Like I was wondering, like for example, that image of the doe. So Arab poets used to compare women to does, like the gazelle, because the gazelle is known for the elegance and like it has like stunning eyes and beautiful body and all that stuff. And trying to find an image like that in the English literature, it was daunting. Like as if in the English literature there wasn't that kind of praising the women by comparing her like to another animal to that extent. But it was something very common in Arabic classical poetry to use that image of the doe. So yeah, so as again, when I choose like specifically the pieces that I think they need to be, you know, transmitted to an Anglophone audience.
Thanks.
I don't know, the swan. Yeah, I saw Sophia writing the swan. Yeah, it's like I don't know if the swan has been used a lot in the English literature, like to become like a marker. Like the doe is a theme, is a recurrent theme, but I'm not sure about the swan. Yeah.
Cool, thank you. Lele had a question as well that I'll just unmute her and let her ask.
Yeah, so thank you, Christina. So this question has to do with the question Dr. Malena raised just now about the realistic side of literary translation. So I find it quite challenging to actually choose a literary translation project. So first of all, you have to tell the original author, I love your work, right? And then you have to ask for permission to translate the work. And then, you know, I'm not talking about the translation process itself, which is fairly, you know, it's a very hard process of working with both languages and the histories and cultures encompassed by those two languages. You know, it requires a lot of linguistic and skills and knowledge and history and culture and everything. But how do you guys choose a literary translation project? And what do you do to facilitate it? So that's my puzzlement right now. Like for this particular book, Sweet Bloods, you know, it's been going on for 2 years or 3 years. I just find it, I love the book and I enjoy the stories and I want to share the stories with the Chinese readers. But, you know, there's this logistic and realistic side of things that, you know, that's preventing me from moving forward. You know, this is my question, I guess. So if you could share your stories and experience, I would be very grateful.
It's a great question. Who would like to answer that first? You can, I guess, raise your hand. Oh, Anne.
Hello.
Okay.
Yeah, I agree with you. You have to fall in love for books. You have to fall in love with them. I mean, there is, as far as I'm concerned, there's no other way. I guess if I was making a living out of translation, it might be different because I would have to translate whatever is proposed to me. But that's probably why I'm not a full-time translator because there's no money in it. If you only want to translate what you love. But I think it's really, and all the students that I've supervised who want to translate for their project, either mostly at the master's level, and I've done quite a few, that would be the first thing I tell them. You know, they want to translate, but they don't know what. I said, well, first you read. Just read and read and read, and you will find something. And then, of course, the question is, has it been translated before? But when you work with French, there's a lot of things that have been done. And it's worked quite well, but I think that's really the secret for me. So why would I love it? Because it's well written. The prose speaks to me. And it's also about something that I'm interested in. So it brings in both things. It's not, you can't separate them. Just like Houssem doesn't write poetry, he's definitely a political person, but he reads poetry. So when you read poetry, you probably, you know, there's something is going to appeal to you. It has to do with language, and it has to do with the content as well, I would think. So that's my answer, but I haven't translated a book in a long time.
Thank you. Yeah.
Did anyone else want to weigh in on that one? A great question. Oh, Marina. Okay, you are unmuted.
Well, I just want to make one comment because I used to go along with what Anne Malena just said. But now I'm actually looking from the other end. What would interest a readership? What would interest a publisher? And I'm on a roll now. So I do have some publishers, and I have my feelers out. What do they want? Is it something that I like? Is it something that we can cooperate with? And so it's become more of a commercial enterprise in that way, although I still only translate what I really love myself. I would never really translate something I didn't like. And the beginning of this year, I got a commission to translate a novel that I love, and I couldn't believe it. Somebody actually asked me to do it. And when it goes that way, you can usually get a better contract because they want that book translated and they want you to do it, so you can get more money for doing it, which is a whole different thing, of course.
Congratulations, that's really great. Yeah. Yeah, thank you.
Just as a side note, I just want to say that I tell my students, never translate for free. Even if it's just candy that you get, you must ask for something in return.
Great words. So we've gone a little bit over time. Is there anyone else who wanted to add to that or share any other thoughts? Feel free to raise your hand or anything. No? Okay.
I just wish, you know, in addition to this annual celebration of literature translation event, we would organize from time to time events like this where people can discuss their translations and reading of their translations and sharing resources, kind of thing. So it's always my wish to create such a community of people who love doing this and who you know, who have a lot of things to share with people. Yeah.
That's a great way to end this, Lele. Thank you. And we can share the link to the Facebook group as well for Western Canadian literary translators. Hope you'll all join up if you haven't already. And it's true, yeah, and stay tuned for more activities. So I will let Anne say the final word, and then we'll wrap up.
Whoa, that's a big responsibility. In response to Lily, now that we don't have to choose a venue, we can do this. I can, yeah, I'm on sabbatical this term, so I have more time. So if some of you would like to meet next month, we can certainly, well, we're meeting on the 30th, so let's take it easy, maybe the end of October. I will do something and invite a few people. I had asked some other people, and you're the ones who responded. So thank you so much for being willing to take part in this. We'll see you for real, I guess, on the 30th. I'll talk to Christiana about this because I'm not quite sure how things will unfold, but your readings are in the can, as they say, right? So thank you again, and have a good night.
Yeah, thank you to everybody for watching and sharing on behalf of the Literary Translators Association of Canada, and of course the U of A as well. We're really grateful to everybody and just for their interest and support in literary translation. So have a great evening, and keep on translating, keep on writing.